All right. So, parking.
Parking.
It's a real problem here on campus.
Episode over.
The end. I like that. Short and sweet. But no, I think this is a problem that affects everybody, faculty, staff, and definitely students.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot worse in the past year, especially with the closure of like Founders Drive, and they've had to kind of shunt resident parking everywhere.
Yeah, it's one of the things that you get every week in your email is an update on the parking situation. Where is it now? Where can you park? Where can't you park? It's
And
fun.
P1 and P2 are now non-resident lots, so I know you're not a resident student, right?
I am not a resident student. I also made the choice not to pay for parking pass. So that makes my walk significantly longer. At this point, I am parking up at the observatory, which means that getting down to class is short and sweet and downhill, and getting back up to my car is painful and long, but it's a good workout, right?
That's one way to justify it.
Sure, until it's raining and I'm carrying a stack of Blue Banner newspapers, and that's not so much fun. But this issue is not new on campus at all.
Oh yeah, no, I remember having parking problems when we started. It was uncomfortable freshman year.
Yeah. I mean, it actually goes back way further than that. In researching this, we found references to parking problems all the way back 1978. It was in the Summit yearbook, where parking passes were available for $5.
Inflation or higher value?
I don't know. They were complaining a lot about parking back then, too, so I can't imagine that there's higher value. Speaking of the value of parking spaces, I found, again, in doing this research on Ash Vegas website from 2008, Jason Sanford reported the head of campus operations at the time, Steve Baxley, said that each parking space costs $14,000 to $17,000 a piece.
How is that?
It was deck parking, specifically, that he was speaking to, so that does make a little bit more sense. But I guess when they break down the cost of all the hours of labor and construction and what have you. But still, when you consider that, you can kind of understand why there's a reluctance to build more parking spaces. And there's also been considerable pushback from the community, campus community and beyond, about going into natural spaces and converting them from, woods and forests to parking.
But
well, again, UNCA, funny history on this. So in 2004, there was a student-led organization that prevented the development of 2.5 acres of land that was across from the Botanical Gardens, across W.T. Weaver Boulevard. And that space, which occupies the same area as the Southern Research Facility that's up there, now, and as of 2010, has the new chancellor's dwelling. Same 2.5 acres of land.
Well, 2 acres to be perfectly fair, but
You are correct. They did save 0.5 acres of that forest.
it's economical.
Yeah, so it looks like the students probably moved on, and once that opposition had kind of faded, then they were able to go ahead with new development plans, which were not parking, to be fair, so...
Yeah, but wouldn't it have been slightly better if it was parking?
Well, I don't know, a $2.9 million house for the residents of the chancellor and public space to gather potential donors. You wouldn't rather have that than 300 parking spaces? Eli's blinking. So all of that was reported, Mountain Express reported upon the building of the chancellor's residence. And if you're interested in looking up the organization that originally proposed that, it was called Friends of the UNCA Urban Forest Campaign.
Well, the original thing it was old growth forest, right?
No, it appears it was hardwood growth forest. So slight difference. How do you get old growth forest? You let the young hardwoods get old. But it was a second generation. So, your first generation of growth is pines. And when you get the hardwoods kind of coming in, it's a significant step that's usually 20, 30 years into the clear cutting of an area. So you just keep setting that back whenever you go in there and clear cut again. And it can be frustrating. There are some beautiful pictures online of that woods and that space, again, if you look up the organization. And also, one of the motivating factors behind that organization seems to have come from an opinion piece in the Mountain Express. A man named Brian Freeborn, who was on the Asheville Transit Commission, put in an opinion piece just essentially saying that creating parking in what is a green space is very short-sighted, and that there should be a higher value placed upon educating students on how to use transit and other forms of public transportation versus taking away, what is an ecological boon to this area.
I remember his solution. He went to Evergreen College, I believe.
Yes, he went to Evergreen College. Yep.
Yeah, because his proposed solution, he references like how Evergreen approached a similar problem.
Right, yeah. Evergreen had over 4,000 students and only 2,000 spaces, which is very, very similar to UNCA. In a Blue Banner report from 2015, Philip White reported that there were a total of 2,629 parking spots, but 4,787 parking passes that went out that year. So we're looking at pretty similar numbers, but other campuses have managed to create solutions.
I mean, we have one. It's just that it requires stretching out, parking spaces to gravel lots that are a bit further from campus.
Right. And I think part of that also, educating new students on how to use the transit systems that are available, how to catch the shuttles. That wasn't part of my orientation. I don't know if it was part of yours.
They mention that you can, but to be honest, Asheville Transit also can be a bit finicky.
This is true for anybody who's ever used the city buses. It could use some work.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. You can use it, but you have to sort of plan around their schedule, assuming that they're on schedule.
And that is part of the crux of the problem there. So, and then also you have to add in all the time. So for me, the last time I took public transport coming from North Asheville to West Asheville was about a 2-hour long bus ride. It was a little painful, to be honest.
I've been there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the fees that are associated with parking. So this year, how much is parking?
About $100 for a parking pass.
Well, $100. Again, the reason I am not parking on campus. It started off at $5 in 1978 and has jumped up. I found a really funny mention in the Blue Banner from 1996. Ty Elliott is quoted as saying, "Just think, if you were at a larger school, you would have to pay $100 for a parking spot a mile away."
That was 96?
1996. Mm-hmm.
Good thing that never happened.
Yeah, cross our fingers.
And the parking fees were going to be lowered from their time, right?
Yeah, again, going back through some of the research that we did, Ash Vegas reported in 2008 that Yuri Colson, UNCA's first transportation planner, had a proposal that would reduce the parking fee from $70 to $30 and essentially work to fund alternative transportation initiatives. There was a program back then called CAP, which essentially would help educate students on using alternative forms of transportation. That program is no longer in operation at this time.
Alternative forms, is that public transportation and also carpooling?
Yeah, so CAP stands for Commuter Assistance Program. So it was links to bus routes, commuter students, shuttle services, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so trying to look at it from a multidimensional way to come up with alternative solutions than just building more parking spaces. Because, I mean, while that I certainly think that does need to happen, I can also understand that, trying to get people to use public transportation is a really good thing for society in general. So something we should look into doing. Now, one problem with using alternative transportation that we haven't really talked about is just timing. I think a lot of students have jobs, and are coming from jobs or from other commitments and having to try to get to class on time. And so when you're looking at these alternative forms of transportation at shuttle services, one problem you run into is just planning that extra 15, 20 minutes to get to class, which can be really tricky when you're, living kind of close to the edge there in terms of all your commitments.
Absolutely. I think it can somewhat exacerbate existing problems when it comes to, especially if there are residential students that have off-campus jobs, and there are only two options for keeping their cars on campus, which they need, is a parking garage, which is incredibly competitive, or a pretty decent walk off of campus. And I've walked there at night. The up at University Heights, like that road leading from the roundabout, at night is completely unlit.
Oh, that's not good. And a lot of students are going to have jobs that go till pretty late in the evening. When you're a student, service industry is pretty high on that list of what we tend to hold down, and service industry jobs tend to go late into the night. So, yeah, not good. Not good. What about the new residence halls that are going up? Do you know
Yeah.
about their parking situation?
I know that it's going to be built basically behind Brown. So I think that might possibly close, kind of the like P23, P22. That was one of the old faculty and staff lots. I have not heard much about parking from there, and I think the issue is that we desperately do need more residential housing because we are in a bit of a snag there. We are expanding rapidly, but we also need to make sure that we expand our infrastructure as, equally as fast.
Yeah, and listening to you talk about these problems, it reminds me of the larger conversation that's happening here in Asheville. Everything you just said can be applied to Asheville in general. Transportation, housing, infrastructure, and rapid expansion. That is what the city is going through. So I think it's interesting to see how UNCA is this
Like
really
a microcosm.
Yeah, absolutely, for the issues that are really affecting the city. So I think going forward, having forethought and strategy towards knowing that this expansion is going to continue. How do you build that into your plans for the future? It's important. All right, may you find a great parking spot today.
Same for you. Same for everyone listening.
Great. Have a good one.
Bye.